in the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce made a really smart hire. They grabbed this marketing team and they came up with this, a tagline that we've all heard before. What happens here? What happens here stays here. In fact, we all know this so well that you've probably used this some other place. You've gone on a little trip, maybe a weekend only, long trip, you've gone places with friends or family or colleagues, and you said, hey, what happens here stays here. You've had a meeting at work or at school somewhere, and you got in that room and you said, hey, whatever happens here stays here. I mean, it was really smart, really good. And that phrase, we've all probably used it in one place or another. Well, just a few years ago, Las Vegas actually changed their tagline. And now it's not what happens here stays here, it's what happens here only happens here. In fact, some of you are like, that's why I don't go to Las Vegas, Because what happens here only happens here. I want to welcome you to Crosspoint this morning. My name is Cale Courtwright, the preaching minister, and sometimes we might wake up and not really feel like being in a corporate worship service, but I want you to know that your presence here matters. Last week we talked about in Mark chapter 4, Jesus calming the storm, and I know that there are people here today who walked in the midst of a storm. And we can reassure one another that Jesus is right there with us, and I believe that with all of my heart. But sometimes when I'm in the midst of that storm, I have a hard time singing. I have a hard time worshiping. And your presence matters a lot, especially in those moments. So thank you for being here and being part of our worship service today. If you have your Bible, I want to encourage you to go to Mark chapter 8. That's where we're going to be today. Mark chapter 8 is the middle of Mark's gospel. And I mean that in kind of a couple of ways. The first is this. There are 16 chapters in Mark. 8 is the middle of 16. Welcome to math class. And it also is the center because Mark wants to do something with this section, with the story. He's been building to it, the first half of the book, and then the rest of it, everything is going to flow from Mark chapter 8. And so let's start in verse 27 this morning. And this is what we read. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. Let's stop right there. Okay. Caesarea Philippi, by the written record we have, is the furthest north Jesus ever goes. It's about 25 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. It's the furthest north he ever goes. Now, the other Gospels maybe spell this out a little bit better than Mark does, but we're preaching from Mark right now. And so Jesus, at some point, looks around to his followers and he says, let's go to Caesarea Philippi. And they probably thought he was joking. And he said, no, we're going to Caesarea Philippi. And they said, no, we're not. We can't go there. Because we know what happens there. What happens at Caesarea Philippi, it stays at Caesarea Philippi. It's not the place for good, religious people to go. Something happens there. Caesarea Philippi is a place you can go today. I'm going to show you a couple of pictures here. And we're going to sit here for just a minute. This is up on the hillside. And you walk into it, and multiple things would have happened in this place. The first thing to acknowledge is the name itself, Caesarea Philippi. It's named after two people. It's named after part of the family of Herod. There were multiple Herods, and they broke up the land of Israel, and they would rule it kind of regionally. It's also, and so Herod builds this in honor of Caesar. Anytime we read Caesarea, this is a city built for Caesar. It's in honor of him, Caesarea Philippi. So you have to understand, when you go there, the city itself, the name means something. And so there would, in this space, be worship to Caesar. But you also see in the middle, you're going to get a better picture in just a minute, just on the other side of that pillar, there's a kind of a stage. And it's in that place that they would offer worship to the god called Pan. Now, the things that would go on here are not suitable to talk about in present company. This is a space and a worship style that would make Las Vegas blush. It's not a place that Jesus should be, that he should take his followers to. On the other side of that, just on that dark area there's a cave. And in this cave, in the day of Jesus, water flowed out of this cave. Now, last week, we kind of hit on it, but as a reminder, water for the ancient person is very mysterious. In fact, they would kind of view it as whatever happens underneath water as evil. There's chaos. It undoes creation, so to speak. And so imagine you have a cave and water is flowing out of it, and they called it the gates of Hades. That the water is flowing out of Hades itself. So let's go to the next picture. This is the stage where they would worship the god of Pan, and in those little cutouts they would put idols and shrines and things like that. And things would happen here that shouldn't happen anywhere. And so Jesus is standing on that hillside, and I think he can see all of this happening in the moment. The next picture, you see the cave that water flowed out of, the gates of Hades. Now, about 150 years ago, there was an earthquake, and it changed how the water moves. It no longer flows out of that cave. So this is where Jesus tells this message. It's important to understand the location because a couple of things are happening here. It's named after Caesar, who holds all political power and the title Son of God. It's happening in a space with competing gods like Pan, and it's happening in the presence of death itself, in the gates of Hades. And it's in this space that we read this. Verse 27 continues. On the way, Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do people say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Jesus does not ask this at the temple courts. He doesn't take them there, not yet, in the temple courts and say, "Let's pull out all of your scripture. Who do you say I am? You worship God just over there. Who do you say I am?" He doesn't give this message near the Sea of Galilee, in the safety of his hometown. He doesn't give this message where he grew up. "Who do you say I am? You've known me. I've been here. Who do you say I am?" He takes them to Caesarea Philippi. And in the blatant face of all of these competing authorities, and he asks, "Who do you say I am?" Now they give what I would call safe answers, good answers, respectable answers. Elijah, John the Baptist, another prophet. You know, those are the type of answers that hedge our bets. It's the kind of thing that says, we've seen this before. We've seen this back in the Old Testament days with the old prophets in the Old Testament. We've seen it with Elijah, maybe our greatest prophet. Or even recently, we've seen this in John the Baptist. Maybe you're just one of those again. Who do you say I am? Earlier before this story, right in the same chapter, Jesus fed the 4,000. He's fed thousands. He's calmed storms. He's cast out demons. You've seen it all. He turns to his followers, his disciples. You've seen it all. Who do you say I am? They might have one view, but you who have been here, who do you say I am? And of course, it's Peter who stands up. Peter gives the answer, and for my money, he gives the right answer. He knows the answer to this question. You are the Messiah. But what we're going to find out is that though he has the right answer, he has the wrong understanding. He says, you are the Messiah, but Peter is probably looking for a certain kind of Messiah. He has the wrong understanding. And before we go into Jesus' teaching here in just a second, I would ask us to pause and to ask ourselves and open ourselves up. How often have you had the right answer, but the wrong understanding? How often have you been able to declare who Jesus is, the right answer, but the wrong understanding for what it means? Because that's what we see happen. Peter declares Jesus is the Lord, not Caesar. At the gates of Hades, Jesus is the one that has the power. In the face of other false gods, Jesus is the one true God. This is a confession from Peter that's going to cost him everything. Jesus says, you're right. And now let me tell you about that. Verse 31. He then began to teach them, the Son of Man must suffer many things, must be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law. He must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about all of this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Now, I am the oldest brother. I have younger brothers. And though we are all professionals in different ways, and we all have our own kind of areas of authority, when we're together, I'm the oldest brother. You know what I mean? I've been in charge my whole life. I'm still in charge. You get it? Like, I was raised in a way that I would be the oldest. I'm also the tallest, which helps, you know. So when we get together, I'm still the oldest brother. I'm in charge, and I like being in charge. And Peter has a misunderstanding in this moment of who is in charge. Because he just stepped out on a limb. And he said, you know what? I think I got the answer right. I think I know exactly who you are. You are the Messiah. And Jesus said, you're right. You know what that means? I'm going to have to suffer. I'm going to be rejected. And I'm going to die. And Peter puts his arm around him and said, hold on a minute. Let's come over here. Because you got the wrong idea. Who's in charge? He says, you know what? You don't understand what this fully means. You know, I probably should have said something. Jesus, when you said, let's go to Caesarea Philippi, I let that go, but I can't let this go. You have the wrong idea. That's not what it means. See, Peter has it in his mind what the Messiah, who he would be, what he would look like. He's missed, though. He's seen Jesus' mission, his ministry, his teaching, but he probably has what all of us fall into, a little bit of confirmation bias. Yeah, I know you've been saying things a little bit differently. I know you've been going to different people. But look, at the end of the day, you're going to be the Messiah. You're going to be a political liberator. You're going to come with triumphant power. But that's not what this Messiah is like. See, I think what we see here is that Peter desperately longs for the kingdom. He wants the kingdom to come through triumph, though, rather than suffering. Peter, who was raised in an occupied land, who is a good Jewish boy. He's a fisherman. He's a blue-collar worker. Life is hard, probably, because there are some days that the fish don't bite. And you still owe taxes that day. See, Peter longs for the kingdom. He wants this kingdom to come, though, through triumph rather than through suffering. He's desperate for this. And I wonder how many times we find ourselves in the same place, longing for a kingdom to come, but through a way that we want it to. Peter longs for this. But it's in this moment that we read Mark 8, verse 33. Jesus turned and looked at his disciples. See, the way I read it is Peter drags him to the side and he starts rebuking Jesus. And Jesus now turns, and it's not just to Peter, it's to the entire disciples. Have you ever been in class before, in another place, you get publicly rebuked? Your teacher, your boss. I mean, Peter is about to be publicly rebuked. Jesus turned, looked at his disciples, rebuked Peter. Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. I wonder if there is a more difficult thing that Peter could have heard. I can't imagine. He just said, you're the Messiah. Now that same Messiah is calling you Satan. But see, what's happening here is Jesus is being tempted, I think. He's being tempted in a way that he's already been tempted by Satan in the wilderness. Satan, at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, Jesus goes out to fast for 40 days, and it's there that Satan meets him, and he offers him temptation of all the things of this world. See, Satan doesn't mind that Jesus is the Messiah. He minds what kind of Messiah he'll be. He says, I'll give you all power and ruling authority here on this earth, where he knows that he will now be able to control, that he'll truly be in charge. He doesn't mind that Jesus is the Messiah. He minds what kind of Messiah he'll be. And here, Jesus says, no, it's time for you to get behind me. Don't tempt me with these types of things. This get behind me is a command to remember who's actually in charge. To remember who is the disciple and who is the master. Jesus reminds Peter, I am the master here. You're a disciple. Disciples are to follow Jesus, not guide, not protect, not possess him. There's a right order to things. Jesus is going to come as a Messiah, but a different kind of one. Peter is looking for a Messiah that will meet his expectations. One that doesn't cost him anything. One that makes his life easier, not harder. Have you ever wanted the same thing? Have you ever wanted Jesus to be the type of Messiah that fits all of our expectations? That doesn't cost us anything, but rather gives us something? I often want Jesus to be the type of Messiah who gives when I ask, who is ready for me to call upon. That doesn't cost me anything, but gives to me. Makes my life easier, not harder. And what I want a genie. I want 3 wishes. I want a cosmic vending machine. That when I get the order right, I get exactly what I want. That's what Peter wants. Often that's what we want. So Jesus rebukes him, says, get behind me. I am the master here. I am the Messiah. You are the follower. Says that to everybody. But look at what happens here in verse 34. Imagine Jesus is on that hillside. He can see what's happening down below him. There is a crowd there. And it says this, then he called the crowd to him along with the disciples. He's calling out to everyone there that can hear him. And Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Jesus is giving this to the entire crowd. This is an invitation to follow, to understand what kind of Messiah he is, but now redefined by the cross. Starting here in Mark, he has in part he has framed it where Jesus wants everything to be hidden. And I want you to imagine if you're reading this book for the first time, you're hearing it for the first time. At the beginning, you see Jesus keeping everything quiet. He shuts the mouths of the demons. Those who are healed, he says, go out and tell no one. Even here, after the declaration of Messiah, he says, don't tell anybody. Jesus is purposely keeping this quiet because he does not want them to misconstrue what kind of Messiah he will be. Because as soon as you think Messiah, you think, what kind will he be? And Jesus says, I'm not coming as that kind of Messiah. It's going to be different. And starting here into the rest of the book, he's going to give 3 distinct teachings, and they are all defined by the way of the cross. What kind of Messiah will I be? I'll be a cross-shaped Messiah. And that's our invitation. In this, he gives us 3 different commands. In these 3 commands, he gives them as such: deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Now, when I read that, the order, I think, really matters. Let's start at the top. Deny yourself. Now, this is not deny yourself dessert, deny yourself seconds, though that's the best example I can give. Because what I would ask a group of people sitting here in 2026 in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is, when was the last time you denied yourself? Not, I couldn't afford it, so I didn't do it, but I could do it, and I told myself no. The truth is that we rarely deny ourselves. We often give ourselves whatever we want. In fact, I would say in our culture, we are most defined by gluttony. And I don't just mean food. We are overflowing. We are stuffed full of everything. Food, stuff, distraction. We don't tell ourselves no on anything. Jesus starts and he says, deny yourself. Church, this is why a spiritual discipline of fasting is so important. To learn to tell yourself no. To, when something like hunger does rise up in you, to teach yourself, to work out that muscle to say no. Because there's other places you need to learn to say no. Deny yourself. The second thing he says is take up your cross. Now, I want you to remember something here. Everybody he's saying this to knows exactly what it means to pick up your cross. And he's saying it before he goes to the cross. This is a new teaching. And imagine especially if you're one of his followers, you're like, hold on a minute. You're redefining everything here. What does it mean to pick up our cross? Because they most likely passed by someone on a cross on the way. What do you mean, pick up your cross? Now, oftentimes, in our day and age, we use this language, right? Like, for instance, you have a lot of chores and errands to do and to run. You're telling a friend this, and they're saying, oh, man, I can't believe you have so much on your plate. And you say, it's just my cross to bear. You have a project in school, and you kind of get teamed up with the group, and you're kind of you're doing most of the work. In fact, these people are all kind of just a drag on you, and you're telling a friend or your parent, and you go, it's just my cross to bear. We use this language, and we've kind of muddied down the metaphorical meaning of it. And Jesus isn't giving a metaphor. Jesus is talking literally. Pick up your cross. And then he says, and then you can follow me. Follow me, not admire me, not just be a fan, not keep your distance, not just add a little bit of Jesus to your life, but actually follow me, be with me, go where I go, do what I do, even if that means the cross. Jesus gives the most counterintuitive thing. Whoever wants to save their life must lose it. Whoever loses their life will save it. This is the paradox of the kingdom, that all the things we try to hold on to are the very things that are actually causing us to lose our life. It says, give up your life. That's when you'll find it. And what I recognized this week as I was going through this, as I was thinking about this, deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me, is that oftentimes what we have tried to do is we've tried to work that backwards. As a Christian here in the 21st century, I think we try to work it backwards. You know, we've made an invitation, follow Jesus. And we said, you know what? He seems like a nice guy. He seems pretty great. And what I'd love to do is I'd love to add some Jesus things to my life. As much as I can, I will follow him. Take up your cross. You know, I'll try and give up some things. I'll embrace some hardship. I'll make it to church the week starting spring break. Some people already went out of town. I'll leave later. Man, that's my cross to bear. Going to church. I'll try to add some disciplines. I'll read my Bible and pray every day. I'll pick up my cross and deny myself. I don't actually think I have to deny myself. I think I could just add enough Jesus that I don't have to do that. You want to find a problem with following Jesus in our day and age? It's working it backwards. I think Jesus very intentionally tells us, deny yourself, take up your cross, and now you're ready to follow me. This is difficult. And the problem is because the question Jesus gives in this text, in this story, is, who do you say I am? Who do you say I am? The problem is that oftentimes, to answer that correctly, we first have to answer, who am I? To answer correctly who Jesus is, I have to understand who I am. And I am not king of my life. I am not in charge. I am merely a follower, a learner, a disciple, following the one that I'm called to follow. I'm learning what it means to be obedient to God by following Jesus, by understanding how he lived, by doing things the way he does them, even if that means he goes to the cross. The challenge for us as a church in our day and age is that oftentimes we have the same temptation of Peter, the same temptation of Jesus' followers in his days. We want a Messiah, but we want him to come in a certain way. We want him to grab onto the power and the might. And we want a triumphant Messiah. What we have is a cross-shaped gospel with a cross-destined Messiah. And he's asking you to be the same type of cross-bared person who lays down our earthly power, who lays down the need for authority, who gives up the seat on our throne. We live in a day and in a place that we often can hold on to that power. He tells us to put it down. We don't have a direct correlation to Caesarea Philippi today, but I think in all of our own lives, we have all of these same areas, whether it's political power or other gods or death itself. We have things that might compete for authority in our life. Things like our careers, our bank accounts, our families, our desires, ourselves. All of these things compete. And Jesus says, if you'd like to be my follower, you can. Who do you say I am? The correct answer is Messiah. But will you understand what that means? The correct answer is to know who I am. But to know that has implications for your life. Peter here starts in this moment. And he takes Jesus aside and he rebukes him. But Peter runs the full gamut. Later, he will deny Jesus. He hasn't come fully around to who Jesus is. But we read in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, that it is Peter who stands up. It's Peter who gives the message to the crowds. And Peter himself has called a crowd. 3,000 people in one day are baptized because of his message. But Peter continues to walk the road to the cross, facing persecution. And later, what church history tells us is that Peter himself will be crucified, just like his Messiah was. And I think today in here, we run that full spectrum. People who are wanting to rebuke Jesus, and you don't understand what it's like. People who will deny Jesus when it gets difficult. All the way to picking up our own crosses. The invitation of Jesus today is to answer this question. Who do you say I am? Who do you say I am? He puts us in a church to work out that question together. Because if you answer that question correctly, who do you say I am? It means that your life must follow it. That you have to learn to deny yourself. Take up your cross as you follow Jesus. As we close today, our shepherds and their wives will be around the room, and we want to invite you to pray with them today. That many of us in here need a prayer of repentance. That we have not denied ourselves as he's called us to. That we have not lived in such a way to pick up our cross. If we can help you in any way, won't you come while we stand and sing?